Before the iceberg, before the panic, before the legend, ... There was simply life aboard the RMS Titanic. A world of music, linen, cold sea air, and endless quiet nights. This video is your ticket to that world. Like and subscribe to join us in forgotten moments from history. On the docks, people clustered in uneven lines, stewards in uniform, dock workers in flat caps, mothers, and children holding parcels, immigrants with their whole lives packed into wooden crates and threadbare suitcases. Comment the time and place you are watching from, and settle in. You are now aboard the Titanic ... before it sank. Ropes creaked against iron bollards. A thin haze of coal smoke hung over the harbor like a curtain between worlds. The morning was gray over Southampton, with a cool wind rising off the water, rattling the lampposts and tugging at coat hems. A lady adjusts the feather in her hat as her maid carries a lapdog. Steel, wood, salt air, the gangplank thuds behind you. The world of the harbor slips away. A businessman steps out of a sleek automobile, pausing to admire the ship with an unreadable expression. The corridors are long and silent, trimmed in polished oak and brass. Light spills through frosted glass panels overhead. Even the scent is strange, part sea, part linen, part machine oil. And towering above it all stood the Titanic. It loomed proud and quiet, as if carved from a mountain. 4 immense smokestacks reached into the cloudy sky. The white wake of the ship stretches behind like a ribbon unraveling in the Atlantic wind. Or perhaps it is a private room with a writing desk, a carafe of water, and a flickering electric lamp. Somewhere a steward knocks softly, offering assistance, adjusting pillows, explaining dinner times. A retired couple carries a thermos and a folded deck chair. Their coats are tidy, their boots polished, but their excitement feels more uncertain. People run alongside, waving as the Titanic pulls away from England's shore. You hear the shouts of crewmen directing passengers. A porter hauls a cart of luggage, the wheels clicking on the planks. Horses clatter past, pulling carriages laden with trunks. Somewhere a child cries. A man sells newspapers announcing the Titanic's maiden voyage. Everything feels busy and wide-eyed. A gentle waltz filters through the deck, and for now it is just a voyage. Just a great floating city gliding quietly over the sea. First-class passengers begin to arrive, dignified, composed, dressed in wool and velvet and silk. Second-class travelers move more briskly. A schoolteacher clutches her ticket in one gloved hand. They board carrying patched bags, bedding, loaves of bread, sometimes chickens, sometimes children half asleep on shoulders. These are the hopefuls, the dreamers. Ireland, Poland, Italy, their languages echo in the corridors as they climb aboard. And then the steerage passengers, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, many wearing clothes from another country, another time. You step across the gangway. The ship gives a subtle groan beneath your feet, as if waking. Inside the Titanic, everything feels impossibly large. Your cabin awaits. Perhaps it is simple metal bunks and a tiny porthole staring out at the gray sea. And outside, the ship begins to move. The water churns. A low, thunderous whistle sounds, deep enough to be felt in your chest. Cheers rise from the docks. Hats wave, the buildings grow smaller, the gulls follow for a time. Then only the sea. Everything settles. The vibrations of the engines become a part of the background, a steady heartbeat. Somewhere above, the band begins to play. Not yet a tragedy, not yet a legend, just life on board. And it has only just begun. It is the second day of the voyage. The Titanic now sails steadily through the open waters of the North Atlantic, its great hull parting the sea with effortless grace. Far from any shore, the world beyond the railing is an endless curtain of blue-gray water and a dome of low-hanging clouds. The waves are mild, like slow-moving hills, and the air carries that unmistakable scent, salt, cold, distant. Depending on your class, you may awaken in a plush feather bed beneath layers of thick white linen. In third class, you lace your own boots beside your cabin mates, chatting softly in a mix of languages, exchanging stories of where you are headed and what waits for you in America. In the second-class cabins, the atmosphere is more reserved. Travelers who are neither wealthy nor poor, sipping tea in private lounges and reading letters from home by the soft light of electric sconces. The atmosphere is louder, more alive, children laughing, elders recounting memories. The meals are hearty and plain, stew, bread, cheese, a bit of tea. There is joy here, even without fine linens or silverware. Families sit shoulder to shoulder. There is often music from a fiddle or the murmur of a lullaby in a language long forgotten elsewhere. There are Turkish baths and a squash court, a smoking room lined with dark wood and leather armchairs, a Parisian cafe with painted murals and real ivy on the walls. Some passengers stroll arm in arm along the boat deck, while others sit quietly by the great staircases, admiring the intricate wrought iron railings and golden clock. Dishes change by the class, but the experience is universal. Warmth, fullness, a break from the chill beyond the walls. The ship continues its steady pace. Below deck, engineers tend the furnaces, shoveling coal, keeping the heart of the ship alive. The Titanic is not silent. It breathes. Pipes moan. Floors vibrate. Water rushes against the hull with a constant, gentle hiss. In the galley, dozens of cooks move in synchronized rhythm. Knives chop. Fires burn. Plates are prepared with surprising precision for a ship in motion. A man reads by a porthole, his hat tilted just so. A young couple exchanges glances on the deck. A girl in third class hums a tune from the old country, watching the water with wide eyes. Or perhaps on a narrower bunk with rougher blankets and less ornament, but always with the sense of quiet separation from the world you left behind. For adults, there is the rare luxury of time. No work, no schedule, just hours to pass however they please. Soft music filters down from the upper decks. A quartet tunes their instruments, for now it is simply a world in motion, a microcosm of society, a floating hotel, a steel cathedral, a dream gliding westward. The dining saloon becomes a world of laughter, candlelight, and conversation. Silverware gleams beneath the glow of electric bulbs. The sigh of the waves, and the faint, faraway music of life still unfolding above. And yet it reflects the heavens perfectly. You step out on deck, the cold bites, you wrap your coat tighter. You hear only the whisper of the wind, the hiss of water, the low, distant throb of the engines. A card game, a piano recital, a moment alone beneath the stars. A birthday is quietly celebrated at one table. A toast is made to safe passage. You can hear faint music from above like echoes of another world. Porcelain teacups clink gently. The scent of coffee drifts among the tables. The ship's deck chairs line the railings, and passengers rest there, reading or dozing or simply gazing out at the sea. The movement of the deck beneath your feet, the wonder of such an enormous machine floating so effortlessly across the sea. A few venture to the library or writing rooms, sending letters that will be mailed when the ship reaches New York. Someone sings, others dance. The air smells of sweat, sea, and joy. Life is vivid here, less restrained, more rooted in the moment. Some dance until their breath runs out. Others simply sit back and smile. In first class, a group discusses politics and the opera. In second class, a young woman sketches quietly in her journal, trying to capture the lines of the ship. In third class, the children play games in narrow corridors, their laughter bouncing off the steel walls. Eggs, ham, rolls with jam, grilled tomatoes, fish. Every choice is available, each dish prepared as if in a grand hotel. Seabirds no longer follow. Even the gulls have turned back. Inside the ship, time begins to take on a different rhythm. You wake gently, not to alarm clocks or blaring horns, but to the hush of the sea, the faint creak of wooden paneling, and the subtle, steady hum of the engines below. The room hums with polite conversation, the air filled with soft chatter and the gentle ring of cutlery. Windows allow you to see the sea roll by as you eat, a reminder that you are moving, not just in miles, but in life. You rise and dress. In first class, a steward might have laid out your clothing, fresh collar, polished boots, gloves neatly placed on the vanity. Breakfast is its own ritual. In the opulent first-class dining saloon, beneath glowing chandeliers and ornate woodwork, waiters in white jackets carry silver trays with perfect posture. In second class, the meals are simpler, but no less satisfying. Fresh bread, porridge, sausage, fried potatoes. And in steerage below, the third-class passengers gather in large communal dining rooms. After breakfast, the day stretches ahead. Some walk the promenade deck, wrapped in overcoats and scarves, the cold air tugging at their hair. There are differences in class, yes, deep and noticeable. But there are also moments where all aboard share the same reality. The cold Atlantic wind, the Titanic offers distractions for every kind of traveler. For children, there is curiosity in every corner, unfamiliar buttons to press, windows to peer through, mysterious corridors filled with promise. Lunch is served. Afternoon arrives slowly. Above, life unfolds like a quiet opera. The sun, hidden behind thick clouds for most of the day, makes brief appearances, golden light bouncing off the brass fixtures, casting long shadows through the tall windows. By evening, a new energy fills the ship. First-class passengers change into formal wear, tuxedos, silk gowns, gloved hands, polished shoes. The grand staircase gleams. In second class there is still elegance, though more modest. And in third class the real music begins. Fiddles and accordions, the clapping of hands, boots stamping gently on the wooden floor, and then comes night. The stars reveal themselves one by one, brilliant, unblinking, infinite. The sea is darker than ink. Titanic sails on, unaware of what waits ahead, unbothered by it. And in your quiet cabin, whether it is lined in mahogany or painted steel, you drift to sleep with the rhythm of the sea. Nothing has gone wrong yet. There is only peace, and the promise of another day at sea. Down below the grand staircases and polished dining saloons, past the layers of wood-paneled hallways and the hum of the engines, Life in third class unfolds in a quieter, simpler rhythm. The corridors are narrower here, painted in plain creams and soft browns, with riveted steel peeking through in places. Pipes run along the ceiling, warm to the touch. The scent is different, less of perfume and polish, more of coal dust, laundry soap, and the faint trace of cabbage stew drifting up from the galley. The bunks are stacked 2 or 3 high, framed in metal, each with a thin mattress, a coarse woolen blanket, and perhaps a coat hung from a hook. A single shared sink stands in the corner of the corridor, where passengers wash their hands, brush their hair, or rinse the long days from their faces. A man plays the concertina in the corner, squeezing out a folk tune, while others clap along. Others climb into their bunks and listen to the sea beyond the walls. A gentle creaking of the hull, a rhythmic slap of water, a distant groan of the great ship adjusting to the swell. These sounds become part of the lullaby, part of the dream of forward motion. The sound of the engines is ever present, a low hum that pulses through the walls like a mechanical heartbeat. People living not in fear or fame, but in the moment, in cramped bunks and shared meals, in whispered dreams and lullabies, floating gently through the dark Atlantic night. The voyage is long, the ocean is endless, but tonight there is a sense of comfort, of motion, of hope. It lulls babies to sleep. It blends with the rhythms of shipboard life. The little girl wears a second-hand dress, a bit too large, tied with a bit of string at the waist. She fidgets while her mother sings softly, a tune in Gaelic or maybe Italian, and the rhythm of the ship becomes part of the lullaby. Nearby, a boy leans against the wall, sketching the ship from memory into a notebook. He has never seen anything like it before. He draws the funnels, the curved hull, the way the ocean disappears past the railing. It is not luxury. It is not quiet. But it is clean, and for many aboard, it is more comfort than they have ever known. A mother braids her daughter's hair in their shared cabin. At meal times, the third-class dining room comes alive. It is simple, long wooden tables, mismatched chairs, and plain white enamel dishes, but the food is warm and the company familiar. And stories. Families traveling from Sweden sit beside young men from Belfast or Galway. Some speak English, others barely a word. But there is a shared language in the passing of food, the lifting of cups, the patient smiles exchanged between strangers who are all headed toward something new. For many, it is a chance at a better life. For some, it is an escape. They dream of America not as a place on a map, but as a fresh start, a land where work might be found, where no one remembers their name, where the future is wide and bright. Men remove their caps and tuck in. The meals are hearty and filling, stewed meats, boiled potatoes, pickled vegetables, and thick slices of bread with butter. Tea is poured from large metal pots, steaming and strong. There is laughter here. Children run down the hallways, giggling, chased by older siblings. At night, the rooms quiet slowly. Some linger in the dining area, speaking softly over tin mugs of cocoa. Outside, above them, the Titanic glides through the Atlantic. But down here, in the warmth of third class, there is something almost timeless. And for those in third class, who paid what they could, who left everything behind, this ship is not just a vessel. It is possibility made real. Below even the modest quarters of third class lies another world entirely, a world of shadowed passageways, of iron staircases and swinging doors, of quiet efficiency and back-breaking routine. This is the realm of Titanic's crew. The crew moved like clockwork in the bowels of the vessel. Few saw them, fewer knew their names. But without them, Titanic would never have glided through the Atlantic night. It is hot here, blindingly hot. The air is thick with soot, and sweat runs freely from brow to chin. These men, often forgotten in the retelling, keep Titanic alive. They feed her fires. They breathe in smoke. A moment of rest before more trays to deliver, more coal to load, more linens to press. Their uniforms are neat and modest. Their hands are always busy, smoothing bed sheets, serving tea, tidying the shared washrooms, offering comfort when the sea grows restless. And though their jobs are less physically demanding than the stokers or trimmers, they carry their own burden of patience, of cheerfulness maintained even when weary. Behind every decorative panel is a steel wall, every luxury underpinned by sweat and discipline. A fireman wipes his brow and laughs with a mate about a song heard from above. A steward slips a child an extra biscuit. A nurse hums a lullaby as she tends to a seasick woman. In silence they moved through the bones of Titanic, keeping the dream alive, and the ship on course through each hour of each day. In the brief gaps between duties, between one tray and the next, they breathe. They know the ship not as a marvel, but as a task, a schedule, a job. Conversation is brief, sometimes in hushed voices, sometimes in bursts of laughter that echo down the metal corridors. Their uniforms are sharp, their bearing calm. They chart the course, monitor the radios, supervise the lifeboats. But even they are part of the machinery. They eat quickly, sleep little, and rarely smile. Responsibility rides heavily on their shoulders. The ship breathes because they work. It moves forward because they do not rest. They speak in accents from all over, Glasgow, Southampton, Belfast. Many left families behind. Some send half their wages home. A few are saving to emigrate themselves when their contract ends. And though no one in the grand dining room will ever see them, the electricity that powers the chandelier, the warmth that fills the radiators, the very movement of the ship, all trace back to their unending labor. More than 800 men and women worked behind the scenes of the great ship, and while passengers marveled at chandeliers and promenades, before the bells ring and before the sun rises, not that the sun is visible deep within the hull, they begin their day. Uniforms are starched, collars tight, boots polished even if no one will ever notice. Dozens of loaves are baked every day, bread rising in long iron trays, golden and steaming. Carrots are peeled by the dozen, chickens plucked and trussed, and always the quiet clang of cutlery being cleaned, stacked, arranged. The work never ends. A steward walks the same corridor he walked yesterday, and will walk again tomorrow. He knocks politely at first-class doors, offers morning tea, arranges fresh flowers if ordered, and attends to every detail with invisible precision. The stewards wake early. Farther below, in the roaring belly of the ship, firemen shovel coal into the insatiable furnaces. In the kitchens, chefs and kitchen hands prepare meals for thousands, soup pots as tall as men bubble quietly. Even their breaks are muted. The crew mess is functional, plain tables, plain cups, plain food. Stewardesses care for women in second and third class, often helping mothers with children or elderly passengers who cannot navigate the maze-like corridors. And then there are the officers, The ship itself is a maze to them. Every hallway has purpose. Every stair has a destination. And yet, within the walls of duty, there are human moments. At night, while first-class passengers drift into sleep under soft quilts, and third-class children are lulled by the hum of the engines, the crew continues. And while history remembers captains and millionaires, the ship was held afloat by hundreds of ordinary people, unseen and unsung. Deep beneath the grandeur, beyond the silk-curtained corridors and the glittering chandeliers, lies a world that few aboard Titanic ever saw, and even fewer understood. It is a world of steel, of fire, of relentless movement. No fresh sea breeze, only heat, noise, and motion. This is the realm of the boiler rooms, the engine rooms, and the mechanical heart of the ship. Heat rolled out in waves, stinging the eyes, searing the skin. The air itself shimmered. Sweat soaked through clothing, pooling in boots and dripping from brows, yet the men could not stop. The ship moved because they moved. Here, there are no portholes. They roamed between pistons, valves, and rotating shafts. They monitored pressures, adjusted steam levels, calculated fuel consumption. A rhythmic pounding as the engines turned the propellers. The hiss of steam released from valves. They ate simple meals, bread, tea, sometimes meat stew if supplies held. They smoked pipes in silence. They mended gloves and rubbed aching backs. The boiler rooms demanded strength, but they also demanded endurance of spirit. The metallic rattle of tools against casing. The crackle of burning coal. You might still hear it, the soft echo of shovels on coal, the hum of the engines, and the heartbeat of the ship that once was. Voices shouted, but often they were lost in the din. Communication was done with hand signals, nods, routines, learned by repetition. They watched for warning signs, though none were expected. These were men of mathematics and metal, custodians of power. The ship could glide through the Atlantic like a swan, but beneath her grace there was grit, and it belonged to them. The machinery thundered around them, a living thing of steam and steel. Greasers worked with careful precision, oiling parts as large as carriages, timing every movement to the pulse of Titanic herself. She moved because of them. She breathed because of them. The men who labored in these depths were known by different names: firemen, trimmers, greasers, engineers. Each had a role. Each kept Titanic alive, though their work remained hidden. The men who toiled in her depths did so without applause, without recognition, and with the full knowledge that their labor was unseen. There were hungry mouths that demanded to be fed constantly. Coal was the only offering they accepted, hundreds of tons of it every day. And so the firemen, known more grimly as stokers, shoveled without end. Their bodies bent forward in rhythm, muscles tight with repetition. If the coal shifted too much to one side, it could throw off the ship's balance. So, in the dark bunkers that surrounded the boiler rooms, trimmers shoveled coal into wheelbarrows and carried it to the fires, silently maintaining Titanic's equilibrium. Shovel, step, throw, shovel, step, throw. Their domain was a long way from the calm promenades above. The boiler rooms stretched across 6 vast compartments, each lined with enormous steel furnaces, 29 in all. Each furnace door opened like the jaws of some ancient beast, revealing a white-orange blaze. It was not a job for the faint of heart. Firemen worked in shifts, 6 hours on, 6 off, though sleep came slowly in the humid bunks near the engine spaces. Many were Irish or Welsh, hardened by years of industrial work. They earned their pay around £6 a month, and some sent every penny home to families in Liverpool or Belfast or Cardiff. Among them worked the trimmers, those who balanced the coal, ensuring the ship remained steady. Their task was no less critical. Then came the greasers, often overlooked, whose job was to keep the moving parts of the ship's massive engines well oiled. Above them, the engineers, senior officers in their own right, clad in dark uniforms, with pens in pockets and notes in ledgers. The sound down here never stopped. It was not the creaking of timbers or the splash of waves. It was louder, deeper. Resting in such a place was difficult. When their shifts ended, these men stumbled back to the crew quarters exhausted. And yet, within this furnace-like realm, there was pride. The men below deck knew they were essential. When Titanic steamed at full speed, the engines roared. She was a floating palace above, but a thunderous cathedral of machinery below. But the ship knew. And in the silence of the deep ocean now, where Titanic rests forever, one imagines that if you could listen closely enough, while Titanic's mechanical heart beat below deck, above the roar of the furnaces, another world unfolded, one of clinking china, polished silver, and steaming tea. It was a world of ritual and routine, of expected civility, and of meals that marked the rhythm of the day, from sunrise to midnight. Food aboard the Titanic was more than sustenance. It was a statement. For first-class passengers, it symbolized luxury and refinement. For those in second and third class, it represented security, the comfort of warm bread, of full plates, of meals arriving like clockwork. It seated over 500 guests beneath softly glowing light fixtures, with tables dressed in crisp linens and decked with cut crystal. Here passengers lingered through long, leisurely meals, served in multiple courses by attentive stewards in white coats and gloves. In every corner of the ship, food connected people, across language, across class, across distance from home. The menus were French, the portions small but many, often extending to 10 or more courses. Dessert came last, Waldorf pudding, peaches and chartreuse jelly, chocolate eclairs, followed by cheese, coffee, and liqueurs. Their meals were wholesome and varied. Breakfast might be kippers, bacon, or porridge. Dinners included soups, roast meats, boiled potatoes, and stewed fruits. The fare was closer to what a middle-class family might serve at home, practical but well-made, with warm service and cloth napkins, fruit baskets in cabins, trays of biscuits in lounges, and even late-night tea or cocoa delivered by request. Conversation flowed as smoothly as the courses. Strangers became acquaintances over shared sauces and second helpings. Aboard Titanic, those rhythms were carefully preserved, even in the middle of the Atlantic, even on a ship carrying over 2,000 souls, even among firemen and aristocrats, immigrants and engineers. The hum of the dining saloons was its own music, forks on china. Silver was polished for the morning. Somewhere a steward turned down a bed and left a biscuit on the pillow, expecting it to be enjoyed in quiet dreams. The low voice of a steward asking if another glass of wine was desired, the murmur of passengers, marveling at a dish they had never tasted before. There was a 24-hour pantry staff assigned to keep the galleys warm and ready. Hunger aboard this floating city was something carefully designed never to arise, for some cigars and brandy awaited in the smoking room, and until the end she fed them well. Oysters, Canson alga, poached salmon with mousseline sauce, filet mignon lily, roast duckling with applesauce. Each plate was artfully arranged, and stewards presented dishes in synchronized motion, revealing each course like a magician lifting a velvet cloth. There were no menus, but the food was plentiful, and importantly, it was included in the ticket price, unlike many ships of the time. Tea and coffee were offered regularly, along with jam, butter, and sometimes fruit. For many immigrants and working-class travelers, the food on Titanic was better than what they had known at home, and certainly more consistent. The first-class dining saloon was a vast chamber to 114 feet long, with high-paneled walls and white-painted pillars. Breakfast in first class might include grilled mutton kidneys, haddock, fresh rolls, and eggs made to order. There were sausages, deviled kidneys, and kedgeree, a curried rice and fish dish popular with the British upper class. Fresh fruit, jams, marmalade, and porridge accompanied the morning meal, all paired with tea, coffee, or chocolate. Served in the palm court or drawing rooms, it featured fine china and delicate sandwiches, cucumber, smoked salmon, egg, and cress, alongside sponge cakes, scones, and eclairs. Darjeeling and Earl Grey flowed freely. The clatter of teaspoons and the murmur of polite conversation filled the air. By noon, luncheon was served. Passengers had choices such as chicken à la Maryland, salmon with hollandaise, or roast beef with horseradish. Vegetables were seasonal, often boiled or creamed. Each dish came with sides of delicate sauces, and menus changed daily. Everything was made from scratch below deck in large, well-stocked kitchens staffed by a professional culinary brigade. Afternoon tea was more than a snack, it was a ritual. Then came the evening's crown jewel, the formal dinner. This was no mere meal. It was a procession. Wines and spirits were served in matched glassware, each labeled by vintage. Second-class passengers ate in their own saloon, smaller and simpler, but still refined. In third class, the experience was more communal. Long tables ran the length of the dining room, and meals were eaten together. Stewards served generous portions of stew, bread, roast meats, boiled potatoes, and soup. Between meals, Titanic offered light snacks, especially for first-class passengers. And so, throughout the day, the ship moved forward, and its people moved from one meal to the next. There is something comforting about the rhythm of meals, the familiarity of breakfast and supper, even in unfamiliar places. On those final nights, long before anyone sensed the cold hush that lay ahead, the kitchens were busy. Bread was rising. Coffee brewed. The ship fed them all. While most passengers drifted into slumber or lingered in lounges beneath golden lights, the ship itself did not sleep. The Titanic's great heart, its engines, boilers, and steel vanes kept moving, steady and unstoppable. The waves, once choppy, now seemed to flatten under the stars. The ship's bow cut through water like glass. There was no moon that night, only stars, millions of them, shimmering across the sky in complete clarity. The sea was so calm it mirrored the heavens. Sailors who stepped out for their rounds found themselves walking between two skies, one above, one below. But above it all, on the open decks and in the quiet corridors, the night watch had already begun. On the foredeck, crewmen pulled their collars high and breathed through scarves. Mothers wrapped in shawls, children curled up against their siblings. The rhythmic throb of the engines soothed many into dreams. The ropes creaked faintly in the cold. Lanterns flickered as wind brushed past. A faint smell of coal and damp clothes hung in the air. Sweat clung to their backs despite the chill above. Shovels clanged, ash shifted. Deep in the belly of the ship, heat still ruled. In the dark, someone murmured a prayer. Someone else stirred and shifted. The lull of the sea rocked them gently. Left, right, left again. They had no binoculars, just their eyes and the faint gleam of starlight on the water. They saw nothing but darkness. Occasionally a wisp of frost formed on the railing. Ice was in the air, sharp and dry. Every breath crackled in the throat. Still, the ship sailed forward, faster than most locomotives, slicing toward the horizon. The night, for all its beauty, held something almost too quiet, a hush that felt like the world holding its breath. His face was unreadable, lost in thought. He might have been thinking of home, or business, or simply marveling at the silence of the ocean. Their boots echoed faintly against the deck planks, but even that sound seemed hushed by the immensity of night. Overhead, the rigging groaned gently. A lantern swayed. Somewhere aft, a door opened and clicked shut. Then silence again. They marked coordinates, checked instruments, reviewed speed. The captain had turned in for the night, but the responsibility remained. Every sound on the bridge was deliberate. A step, a breath, the ruffle of a coat, as someone leaned in to check the charts. Even the brass handles on the deck doors grew icy. The smoke from the ship's funnels stretched thin and straight into the windless night. It was sometime after 11 p.m. The North Atlantic had settled into an uncanny stillness. The cold was sharp, biting. The smoking rooms were quiet now. The dining saloons had long since been cleared. The key clacked rhythmically, sending signals into the void, hoping for echoes from vessels far out of sight. Sometimes they received laughter, greetings, or complaints. Sometimes silence. Plates were stacked in silence. In the great staircases, light still spilled softly down from the crystal dome above, cascading over polished railings and marble landings. But there were no more footsteps, just stillness. Up in the crow's nest, 2 lookouts stood at their post, nestled in thick coats and gloves, peering into the black ahead. Down below, the stewards dimmed lights in hallways and offered one last knock for any late-night requests. In the wireless room, operators tapped out messages, bits of conversation, requests from passengers, weather updates from nearby ships. Meanwhile, in third class, entire families were already asleep. But not all could sleep. Some crewmen paced narrow catwalks. Others checked lifeboats, those heavy wooden shells suspended from davits along the open decks. A few passengers wandered alone. A gentleman in a long coat and scarf paused near the rail, staring out across the Black Sea. Back in the boiler rooms, fishermen fed coal into the hungry mouths of the furnaces. But higher up, the air was turning colder still. And far above, in the bridge, the officers stared out over the bow. The Titanic sailed on. The stars turned slowly above. The stillness deepened. And below, across hundreds of cabins, thousands slept, rocked gently by the sea, unaware of the cold growing sharper, unaware of what lay ahead, unaware that this quiet, endless night would soon be remembered for eternity. As the great ship steamed calmly across the Atlantic, her decks alive with quiet chatter and gentle footsteps, many passengers went about their journey not as titans of industry or society, but as the forgotten, the quiet, the unremarkable in the eyes of history. Families traveling not for luxury, but for a new beginning. His handwriting was rough, his words simple, but between the lines lived a tired man filled with cautious hope. That maybe, just maybe, life in America would be gentler than the workhouses of Cork. There was a young Swedish woman, barely 20, clutching the hand of her younger sister as they admired the tiny porthole in their cabin. It was the first time they had ever seen the ocean. They were headed to Minnesota, where their cousins had written home about wide skies and fields of opportunity. But they had hope. They had songs from home, stories whispered in the dark, and dreams of another life waiting across the sea. Wrapped in borrowed coats, they stared up at the unfamiliar stars. But woven beneath that tapestry were thousands of quiet lives, each one delicate, dignified, and meaningful. They were not remembered with statues or headlines, but in these moments of calm, before the storm, they simply were. And that, in the stillness of the ship's final peaceful hours, was enough. One boy asked his mother if heaven was this big. She only smiled and pulled him close. Below the grandeur of the upper decks, deep within the lower quarters, lived third-class passengers whose names would rarely make the papers. Down another corridor, an Irish bricklayer with soot under his nails quietly jotted a letter to his wife back home, describing the ship as a floating castle. There was no orchestra here, no glimmering chandeliers, just the soft hum of conversation in many languages and the occasional burst of laughter. A Norwegian father of 4 whittled a toy horse from a scrap of wood for his youngest son, while a Sicilian woman softly sang to her infant daughter, her voice echoing faintly off the iron walls. In the dining saloon, simple meals were shared: hard bread, stewed cabbage, tea in metal mugs. The stokers in the engine rooms, bare-chested and soaked in sweat, never saw daylight. Each hour was measured by the furious rhythm of coal shovels scraping steel, the hiss of steam, and the glow of fire. To them, the Titanic was not a marvel of modernity. It was a furnace, a heartbeat, a job. And then there were the crew, dozens of them, each performing tasks so routine they faded into the rhythm of the ship itself. Up on the decks, some of these souls ventured out at night to feel the chill Atlantic air. They were the ones who had the least: no private promenades, no fine china, no reserved stewards or grand banquets. History remembers the Titanic's wealth, its marvels, its tragedy. The Atlantic Ocean had grown strangely calm by the late afternoon of April 14th, 1912. The Titanic sailed on in almost eerie stillness, the water smooth as glass. On the promenade decks, couples strolled beneath blankets of fur and wool, admiring the open sea and the slight chill in the air. The stewards had brought out deck chairs and rugs for those who wanted to sit with a book or simply gaze across the vast gray horizon. Roast lamb, boiled potatoes, and treacle tart filled the space with a cozy, familiar aroma. Children laughed quietly, their voices bouncing off the paneled walls, while parents leaned in to talk softly over cups of coffee and biscuits. A few passengers noted how cold it had suddenly become. Others returned to their cabins, slipping under blankets, tucking children into beds, and blowing out the gas lamps beside their bunks. The hum of the engines and the gentle thrum of footsteps down the halls were the final sounds many would hear before drifting into sleep. The sea, still unnaturally calm, began to reflect the stars now pricking into the night sky. The ship continued to glide forward, its lights glowing like a floating city, in the middle of an endless black sea. From above, it might have looked like a lantern drifting through nothingness, elegant, brilliant, and unaware. Some walked laps around the deck to keep warm, coats buttoned tight against the increasing chill in the air. Conversations were murmured, quiet and slow, as if the ocean had lulled everyone into a gentler state of mind. Only the ocean stretching endlessly in every direction, silent and deep. The Titanic sailed on, proud and calm, her passengers rocked to sleep by a ship believed to be unsinkable, beneath a sky filled with stars. Passengers noted how the sea had turned to a dark mirror, reflecting the low-hanging clouds and the shimmering silhouette of the ship itself. Soft music from a string quartet played nearby in the reception room, drifting lightly through the air, notes falling like feathers onto polished wood floors and velvet-lined walls. The scent of perfume mingled with freshly baked pastries, served with the afternoon tea. Madeleines, lemon sponge, and scones with thick clotted cream. No waves lapped the hull, and even the wind seemed to hush. A gentle quiet fell across the decks, broken only by the distant echo of the engines deep within the hull, and the occasional creak of the ship's iron frame. Laughter and conversation flowed in dozens of languages: Irish, Swedish, Italian, Norwegian. Some played cards or sang folk songs. Others shared stories from their villages and plans for a better life in America. Mothers braided their daughters' hair while the men smoked pipes and talked about work, land, and hope. The rough wooden benches and iron-framed beds may have lacked luxury, but there was a warmth and community, a feeling of togetherness and shared future. For the passengers on board, this Sunday had felt like a day suspended in time. In the first-class reading room, ladies in elegant dresses paged through English novels and French fashion magazines, their gloved hands wrapped delicately around porcelain teacups. Further below, in second class, families gathered around tables in the library or enjoyed a warm supper in the dining saloon. Down in steerage, the hum of life continued with its own rhythm. As the sun dipped toward the western edge of the sky, the temperature dropped sharply. Some passengers stood by the railings, their breath visible in the cold, quietly soaking in the beauty of the stillness. Yet nothing seemed out of place. No alarms, no cries, no sense of unease. Night had settled fully across the Atlantic, blanketing the world in a deep, inky darkness. Above, the stars shone with unusual clarity, scattered like frozen sparks across the heavens. There was no moon, only starlight and the soft glow of the Titanic herself, her decks illuminated by golden lamps, her towering funnels casting long shadows across the quiet sea. The vast stillness of the night was unlike anything most passengers had ever known. The ocean was so smooth it seemed not to move at all. A few small gatherings lingered in the common areas. Someone played a fiddle. Others clapped softly in rhythm. Officers on the bridge scanned the dark horizon, noting the stillness of the sea and the extraordinary cold. Down in the boiler rooms, firemen continued to feed coal into the furnaces, sweat dripping from their brows even in the chill. Her decks now quiet, her passengers unaware that they were living in a moment that would never come again. The Atlantic stretched endlessly outward, a black mirror touched with frost. And below the waves, deep in the frozen sea, something waited in the dark. But for now, the Titanic floated untouched. Untouched and impossibly still. No alarms, no shouts, no chaos, just the calm before history. Engineers monitored the great machines that propelled the ship forward. Above them, stewards gently dimmed hallway lamps and checked that passengers had everything they needed for the night. Laughter rose from groups seated on wooden benches, families sharing bread, cheese, and stories. In many cabins, the only sound was the soft breathing of those who had already fallen asleep, rocked gently by the motion of the ship, wrapped in dreams of new beginnings across the ocean. Some dreamed of reunions, others of land to farm, others still of shops to open, schools to attend, lives to rebuild. Though the accommodations were modest, there was a spirit of hope, of connection. Many had never sailed before. Many had never even seen a ship this size, let alone one this grand. There was wonder in their eyes, anticipation in their hearts. Some would later describe it as surreal, even supernatural. But aboard the Titanic, all remained calm. In first class, the evening had passed with elegance and charm. The final dinner had ended hours ago, but guests still lingered in lounges and smoking rooms. Gentlemen discussed politics and railways over brandy and cigars. Ladies, adorned in satin and pearls, reclined on plush divans, chatting softly about fashion, family, and summer plans. The stewards moved quietly between them, offering coffee and biscuits on polished silver trays. Some passengers returned to their cabins early, while others took a final stroll along the promenade. The air was cold now, very cold, and the silence of the ocean gave the night an almost cathedral-like reverence. Breath curled in misty trails as people paused by the railings, gazing out into the blackness. There were no waves, no wind, only the muffled throb of the engines and the low hum of conversation carried from the interior. It was easy to believe, standing there under the stars, that nothing could ever disturb this peace. In second class, families and couples had also retired for the night. The dining saloon had emptied, and the quiet clatter of dishes being cleaned drifted up from the galley. Children were tucked into bed beneath thick woolen blankets. A few parents read stories by the soft yellow light of oil lamps. Some passengers wrote in journals, recording what they had eaten that day, what they had seen, and what they dreamed the future might hold once they reached America. Among the third-class passengers, the mood was warm and cheerful in its own way. The crew carried out their duties with quiet professionalism. Midnight approached, and the Titanic sailed on, graceful, immense, and serene. The stars glittered overhead,